I can see a lot of faithful faces, regular faces, a lot of new faces. I welcome new and old, and I'm so pleased to see this network growing every time we have a new webinar. So today we are in our number 3 for this academic year, and we are very honored to have with us Dr. Mulki Al-Sharmani, who is a professor of Islamic Studies at the University of Helsinki. She is a member of the Knowledge Building Working Group of Musawah, and she is author of several books and publications. I'll list a few. Number 1, this is a very well-known book, Islamic Feminism, Hermeneutics and Activism. And then second, Gender, Justice and Legal Reform in Egypt, Negotiating Muslim Family Law. Number 3, Men in Charge with a question mark, Authority in Muslim Legal Tradition. And 4, Wellbeing of Transnational Muslim Families, Marriage, Law and Gender. And last but not least, Justice and Beauty in Muslim Marriage, Towards Egalitarian Ethics and Laws. These are just a few of her publications. The title of her presentation today is Islamic Feminism, Hermeneutics and Activism. So this is Dr. Mulki Al-Sharmani. Before we give you the floor, Dr. Mulki, I think I will ask my colleague Hatun to say a little bit about the series for the newcomers. Go ahead, Hatun.
Yeah, so good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. The series of Empowering Muslim Women in Scientific Research is a series that explores the imagination and representation of women in history and today in a fully fledged ambition so that it would explore through MENA women's work in art, literature, history, archaeology, medicine, and sciences, along with their representation and perception in the works of non-MENA academics. This series includes speakers from the MENA region, the Gulf, the West, everywhere. The meeting point of these speakers is their research on women of this region. Through their multi and interdisciplinary, distinctive, innovative, and creative approaches to their fields, they actually deconstruct the stereotypes of Muslim women and emphasize their diversity. This region, which comprises the Arab world and the Muslim and a large part of the Islamic world, is considered today to be one of the hottest spots in the world politics, economy, and wars. But as usual, women are the least visible and yet the most affected. This series, which is envisaged as a platform for debate among academic students and the public actors, um, was actually has started at the University of Manchester in December 2021 and ran through until the end of the academic year in May 2022 on the Zoom platform. This is a renewal of this platform, but it is done, it has another dimension, the partnership with the University of Sharjah on Teams platform. Hence, there's these, these changes. So this is a point of venture between the two universities. The organizers of these series, they come from different backgrounds, scientific and humanitarian and humanities. The organizing committee members are very happy to invite you to engage with us in this discussion forum, which defeats geographical boundaries and extends opportunity for participation for everybody, everywhere in the world. Please, Dr. Mulki, the floor is yours. We look forward to hear from you about this very important and timely issue, Islamic feminism. You're muted. It's on the top line, next to the share. Yeah. You yes. Yes,
Okay.
no,
Yeah. But
yeah,
by the
you
way,
are.
I don't mute myself. It unmutes me.
I
The
think it's
technology.
automatic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
it's
technology is
automatic.
not on my side today. But first of all, thank
Don't
you
worry.
so much, Dr. Zahia and Dr. Hatoun, for inviting me. I really value and have a high regard for your initiative and for this forum. I've attended several of the lectures that you organized, and I think it's an excellent initiative. I also want to thank all the colleagues who came to join today. I appreciate your interest, and I look forward to your comments, your questions, and for us to learn together. So basically, what I have in mind is to give you present actually the book that came out last year. And by the way, Dr. Zahia and Hatoun, how much time should I speak for?
You have from 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay, give me 40 minutes then. I'm a bit ambitious. I wanted to tell you everything, which is not a good idea, but I'll try to stick to the time. And please tell me when I have 10 minutes and when I have 5 minutes. Okay? Thank you. And Dr. Zahia, can it be slideshow, maybe? Is that possible? Like at the bottom, there's this reading book, and there's a little screen thing at the very bottom. At the bottom of the, if you click that one, at the way bottom, where it says,
there's a picture of a screen.
There's a picture of the screen at the bottom, so this way people can see
one to
better.
The right, where you increase or decrease the size of the image. You have.
Yeah, I know I am sharing, but I can't see what I'm sharing, to be honest. So it says stop. Yeah, it's not showing to me. Do you see it? Let me share again. What's happening here? I'm not sure.
I know.
Oh dear, what's happening today with the technology is something unusual. I was sharing a moment ago, wasn't I?
Yeah,
Where
you
have
were.
we gone? Where have they gone? I'm not sure. Let me try again.
Okay, meanwhile,
The PowerPoint presentation is here. Okay, share.
Okay.
I received it. Shall I try
You try as well while I try too, because I don't know what happened. I shared and then they've disappeared. Here. Can you see them again? No?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yeah, but
Okay. Yes, we can. At the bottom, there's a
yeah. You want me to do it a slideshow from the beginning?
Please. Yes, please.
Yes. Slide. Well, it's actually from the beginning, right? Like that?
Yes. And can we go to the next one?
That's right.
Thank you.
It's actually like this?
Yes. Perfect. Yes. Or before? Is it before? That's the problem when I can't share. I don't know what I'm doing. Slide 2, which says the presentation outline. Maybe slide 2, the presentation outline. That's the one before. Yes, precisely. Okay. And please tell me when I have 10 minutes and then 5 minutes.
I will.
Thank you. So basically, I would like to share with you a bit about what this project was about. And these are some things I want to share with you if I get the chance. So first, I want to talk about Islamic feminism and how of course, I understand the category as a field of inquiry that I locate within Islamic studies, and why should we care? Why is it relevant also not only for the question of gender, but beyond the question of gender in terms of its contributions on how we engage with texts, how we study them. And towards that aim, I will share with you, some of these hermeneutical approaches of these selected scholar activists that I've studied. And then, which is reflected in the first word in the subtitle, hermeneutics, But then this particular kind of scholarship is also, as many of us know, and is relevant and it's unique, perhaps we can say, because it's also very much linked to, at least the ones I've studied, to activism on the ground in multidimensional way, right? And I want to, in the book, I talk about two case studies, one transnational and one national case, which is Egypt. I'll try to share some snippets with you from the Egyptian case, like how is it relevant and what are its limitations. Dr. Zahia, can I go to the next one? Yes, thank you so much. I'm using this term as not as an identity marker. I am aware there are scholars who don't want to be called Islamic feminist. I'm not calling them Islamic feminist. I'm particularly using Islamic feminism, right? And I call them Islamic feminism scholar activists. And I think it's still relevant to use it analytically. And how do I understand it? How do I define it in this project? For me, it's Islamic because these scholars are very much in-depth and robust way working on Islamic text, variety of them, Quran, exegesis, usul al-fiqh, fiqh, and so on, modern family laws. It's also Islamic, I argue, because this work is located within Islamic intellectual thought. It's a critical engagement, but it's located within Islamic intellectual thought. And the key figures involved in this do not shy away, in fact, are very clear that it's also a faith-based position. So there are certain starting points that they ascribe to regarding the relevance, normative relevance of the tradition, right? Now, for me, feminism also needs to be unpacked. The way I define it, it's feminism because it's also very much draws on and is informed by feminist epistemological theories, right? For example, the question of the relationship between knowledge and power, the question of how we trace the genealogy of concepts and how they formed about. We do have a subfield called feminist studies where it has contributed something to how we know what we know. And in that sense, I say this is Islamic feminism as well. I see their work in that way. And also the methodologically, the kinds of methods they use, especially the combination of methods and how do they draw on tools used by the fuqaha, the jurists, or the exegetes, but how they add to it and how they understand it and the diversity. So there's and also a feminist lens in terms of that methodology, right? And of course, it is very much a social justice project. It is not knowledge only for the sake of knowledge, but knowledge that aims to bring about change on the ground, whether it's very specifically reforming Muslim family laws. So I see it as a kind of knowledge-based movement. Okay, although the word movement is a bit tricky, maybe I step back from it. I can't call it a movement, but at least it's a scholarship that in which the scholarship, the knowledge production, and the activism are very much intertwined. Can I go to the next one? Hang on, Professor Zahia, 1 second. Excuse me, everybody, because I don't know if I send you the last one. Yeah, I did. Okay. Yes, please. Okay. And just to give you a sense of the methodology, I don't know if it's coming again or not because I'm not controlling my slides, so I feel a little bit lacking control. But again, what text are these scholar activists that I've studied are working on? The Quran, certainly, and then what I call Islamic interpretive tradition, and I break it into exegesis and on Islamic jurisprudence, both the usul and the fiqh, and for the hadith and Sufi text, and also biographical dictionaries. And I think it's very important that we study this kind of scholarship in a more robust, integrated way, because often we've had people write about it, and very important colleagues, and they definitely made contributions, but often the focus has been, okay, what did these scholars say about Quran? Or bits and pieces here, what did they say about fiqh and its relationship to modern family laws? In this project, my aim was this integrated approach, like, okay, if I look and bring their different works into conversation with one another, what findings do I come up with, take away regardless in terms of not only the readings that they produce, but more importantly, I believe the methodology as well, and then also their activism. Okay, next one. Okay, the next one, please, or the one before. I think it was the next one. The next one. The next one. Yeah. Okay. But you know, there's a one about where I talk about. Can you go back? Because I can't control it. So can you go back? Okay. Because yeah, please ahead. Sorry, I apologize because I wanted to tell you something about, but which one is it? But anyway, I already talked about this, but I just want to tell you a little bit about my methodology. This lasted for, it was funded by the Finnish Research Council, and I studied it from 2013 to 2018, and it involved very in-depth textual study. On the one hand, of these scholars that I selected, not everybody, but you see them there, all their works, all the things that they've written, and so I was interested only in their development intellectually also. But then I was also studying in the primary sources that they were working on. So if you know, Keshi Ali is working on some fiqh book, or Ziba Mir Husseini, or let's say, for example, Amani Saleh, who only writes in Arabic. You know, so I was also looking at these primary sources, I myself, you know, and then I did it combined textual and anthropological research. So I had the opportunity and the privilege of getting this funding, where I was on several years. It was 5 years, where I also attended different activities that they were engaged in Egypt and elsewhere, which is the activism part, like workshops, training of imams, and I also did interviews, not almost all of them except a couple, but the ones I haven't done, also I was in correspondence with them, and the interviews was not only with them. So I was in interviews with religious scholars and their ideas about this kind of work, and some religious scholars with whom they were in touch. I also did interviews with young Azharites, interviews with women and men, you know, and their ideas about Muslim family laws, also with women's rights activists who were pushing for reform of family law. So I was interested also in studying them in the context, in the community in which they were producing this knowledge, and they're trying to change it, right? So that was the ethnographic part about it. And then the activism part, I focus on 2 case studies. Okay, and then broadly what I say is that hermeneutically, if I look back and I want to like give an integrated understanding, present of what are they doing hermeneutically, I argue in the book that these methods, what they're doing, can be grouped into 2 categories: a hermeneutics of deconstruction and a hermeneutics of reconstruction. And it's very important also to understand that these 2 are intertwined. Sometimes when the scholar is doing deconstruction, they're also reconstructing, or when they're doing reconstruction, they are also deconstructing. So they're not necessarily completely separate. But it's also true that some of them do more of one than the other, right? Okay. Can you move forward, Dr. Zahia? I apologize. Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, okay. And this is tells you what I did in terms of research. Also, I did some follow-up research, particularly ethnographic research, after my grant finished, but I wanted to see, okay, what was happening, particularly the impact. Is there any impact? What are the limitations, and so on? Okay, can you go forward, Dr. Zahia? Thank you. And these are the people that I've studied. And can you move forward? Thank you. Sorry. Okay. So let me explain. So initially, when I was thinking about this project and in the early writing, I thought about them because it was one way of trying to understand their work systematically. So I would divide them initially first. Okay, this person works on Quran, this person works on fiqh, this person works on Sufism, and so on. And that was one step of the research, which was useful, but I felt like that was limiting, because I wanted to see their hermeneutical contributions, their methodologies. So as I worked on the work later on, I felt like, okay, can I bring these methodologies into conversation with one another, regardless of what they are working on? And this is what I came up with, this idea of deconstruction and reconstruction. So what is the deconstruction? Based on the works that I've studied, it's two kinds. Basically, it's about, let's try to understand where this religious patriarchy is coming from. And it has two kinds, and I show in the book examples how these two kinds work, drawing from their different works, like from Saadiya Sheikh working on hadith or on Sufism, or for example Umayma working on tafsir, or Keshi Ali working on fiqh books, and so on, right? So the deconstruction, first one kind of it is really trying to understand where certain normative concepts that have become the building blocks of patriarchy in Islamic legal tradition, how were they formed, whether it's Qiwama, Daraja, and others. How were they formed in the tafsir, and so on. Also, like, for example, how the fiqh model of marriage was formed, this idea of maintenance versus obedience. How do they trace it? How do they map it out? How do they show us discursively and historically how that came about? So that was the one type of deconstruction. So deconstruction, primarily, I see it as a kind of a diagnosis, understanding where this come from, and in a way then demystifying. And the second type of deconstruction is, I was particularly looking at certain works, some scholars who were deconstructing the methodology used by these early jurists. Are they being true to the methodologies that they themselves devised, right? Example, Niveen Rida looking at what does Tabari do with the tafsir of 4.3 that has to do with polygyny, and so on, right? So the deconstructing the methodology itself, and how it's applied. Is it consistent? What premises is it based on? Ideological premises, social premises, right? What are the blind spots? But also looking at the productive areas in it as well. So that was the deconstruction part. Now, in terms of can I go to the next one? The reconstruction. No, I think it's no.
Yes, it's this one. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think there's another one. Yeah, this is the one. And okay.
You were here, and
yes.
then I moved here.
Right. It's deconstruction again. Okay. Can you go to the next one? Okay. The reconstruction part. Yeah. You don't. Sorry. You don't need to move. Yeah. Okay. It's there. It involves two things, and I think these two things are very important, especially when we think about the critique against this kind of work. And we do benefit from that critique, and there's a chapter where I focus on the critique and what we take away from it, right? But often the critique, I would say, has often focused on, do they make the case for gender equality or not? For example, like Aisha Hidayatullah's book in Feminist Edges of the Quran, right? And I think that's a bit limiting, because then it's limiting because it doesn't see it takes a narrow approach to this kind of work. So based on my analysis of this work, I say the kind of hermeneutics of reconstruction that they do involves two things. One, which is very important and which I argue has not been paid enough attention to in the critical work that has been done on Islamic feminist scholarship, is how do they center and how do they revisit, and what new understandings they give to key theological and ethical principles and ideas and notions that we are familiar with in the tradition. So what does it really mean? Many of us here know very well Wadood's work on Tawheed and her argument, which she has written about in many books, Tawheed as a social praxis, Tawheed as a framework for egalitarian relationships. What are the implications of that in how we understand Tawheed in a new way? Or the Niveen Rida's, and so I go deep into that, like aside from the gender issue, right? But what does it what new understandings, what are the theological and ethical contributions here in terms of understanding these key concepts. Rida's argument about that the Quran, approaching it as a spiritually integrative method. Amani Saleh, for example, she has work where she talks in detail about and analyzes the concept of haqq in the Quran, but not only as an attribute of God, but how it's multidimensional meanings and how it's sort of like a paradigmatic concept that really frames how we understand social relations, right? In a different way. Or Saadia Sheikh's idea of how men and women as believers, right, equally have the potential of, maintaining the balance between the Jamali and the Jalali attributes and so on, right? Next one. I think I shared with you the slide that is not revised, but it's okay. I don't want to waste your time. So that's one kind of reconstruction that I think is very important, and I talk about it in one of the chapters and go in detail in it. Not only, and then the other one of reconstruction is when they offer new different readings of certain so-called gender verses, whether it's the polygyny verse, whether it's the Qiwama verse, or whether it's the Daraja verse. And there, I go through their differences and where they meet and so on. And there, what I want to emphasize is, again, I think it's limiting to look at, okay, I think their contribution, and also what we learn from the limitations is not, okay, do they give us the correct reading and a gender-sensitive reading, but rather how they deal with tensions. That's also relevant methodologically. And what I see them doing, and they do it in different ways, I'm not arguing that they're all the same, is that not an alternative reading, i.e. 4:3 means this. So this is how we should understand polygyny. Or Surah An-Nisa, Ayah 34, Al-Qawama verse means this. That's not what they're doing. And I think that would be not a helpful way, research-wise, to understand their work. I see, especially if you read their works in an integrated, comprehensive way, I see them as a field of study that's still, of course, growing and developing, that they give us like new frameworks, new modalities of approaching these texts and how we drive norms from them, rather than this is the reading. Right? And hence I see when we as critics of Islamic feminism, we take them to task, which we should at any scholarship, we learn from critique. We need to look at these different things that they are doing and not only focus the question on, okay, did you make the case for gender equality or not? Are you imposing your own modernist notions or not? Okay, Dr. Zahia. How much time do I have?
About 7 minutes.
7 minutes?
7 to half an hour, and then you have another 10 minutes.
You mean 7 minutes? I have 7 minutes.
I think there is a technical issue. The slides are not moving.
I know, and it's not the one that I wanted actually. Okay, but let me just give you. I'm sorry, guys, but I can send you the revised one.
You still have about 15 minutes. You have
15 minutes. So I just want to give you an example of a deconstruction one and a reconstruction one. Can you move or not? Maybe not.
It's actually not. I'm trying, but
yeah, I know.
It and open it.
Okay, I will tell you something.
I'll stop sharing and reshare. Maybe it's just frozen.
Yes. Yeah. Stop sharing.
Okay. Share again. Today is not our day, technically, is it?
No, it's not our day.
It's actually not well. It's not working well. I can't find it.
Okay, I can tell you about it. And
please, yes.
We apologize, but I'm more than happy to share with you the revised one. So I in this presentation, what I wanted to do is also give you an example of how does this deconstruction work and how does this reconstruction. So one example for the deconstruction, and some of you are very familiar with it, is Abu Bakr's work on al-Qiwama, the concept of Qiwama in 434. And so she traces how it was interpreted, that word itself, how it became a patriarchal concept Zahia, did I lose you, Dr. Zahia? Anyway, I haven't lost everybody. I think. Can you all hear
I'm
me
here.
still?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
No,
We
Okay.
are all here.
But
Yes.
you are in the center now.
I'm where now?
You are at the center of the image. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So
I
she
think that
traced.
that point is very important, actually.
Right.
Al-Qiwama, please explain to us. Tell us
Absolutely.
how it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay. And then I want to link it to lived realities. Actually,
please. Yeah.
why should we care about? So she
Mhm.
goes through this 10 centuries of mufassirin, starting from At-Tabari all the way to modern times, Muhammad Abdu, and afterwards even Muhammad Mitwalli Sha'rawi. And she goes through how do they interpret just that first part of the verse, الرجال قوامون على النساء. And she shows very carefully how it becomes really a concept, starting from At-Tabari. He says they are Ahl Qiyam, and he explains it as men having the obligation, first the obligation to provide and also to discipline their wives. And then with Az-Zamakhshari and Razi and so on, then it becomes not an obligation, but a superiority. And then, so there's a shift that happens. The obligation is maintained, but it's also superiority. And then these mufassirin start giving attributes, justifications, because men go to jihad, men pray, lead the prayer, men wear imama, men do horseback riding. And then even with some of them a bit later on using pseudoscience arguments, like rationality arguments, the question of wet and dry, right? So she shows that how it becomes a concept, right? And then a patriarchal concept, a norm, and that is not just obligation, but now male superiority justified intellectually, morally, and then the language that the mufassirin use is also very interesting. Like so, Zamakhshari would describe the relationship between a husband and a wife as the one between the ruler and his subjects, right? And so on. And then she also, and so there are layers of meanings attached to it. It becomes authority, it becomes superiority, and different justifications are given to it. And then she shows, we come towards the medieval time, then they start doing Quran, tafsir al-Quran bil-Quran, and then they quote verse, Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 228, the one that has talks about daraja. But although that one doesn't only talk about daraja, it talks about the ethics of divorce and how the two should not be magnanimous, should be just. She shouldn't hide the pregnancy. He shouldn't abuse her, right? Then they start saying, yeah, men have qiwama because they have daraja. And they start using this circular argument. Men have qiwama because they divorce, and they can divorce because they have qiwama, right? And then they start using, at some point, the mufassirin later on will start using lots of weak hadith, many weak hadith, and then it becomes kind of like a public qiwama. Okay, and they start using the hadith of, لا يفلح قوم ولوا أمرهم امرأة. Folks will not prosper if they put their affairs in the hands of a woman. So she shows how layers of patriarchal meanings are attached to this, and how it becomes a patriarchal concept that denotes authority, that denotes superiority, and justified as God-given and also given attributes. Then she shows a shift in the modern tafsir discourse with Muhammad Abdu, how then he starts introducing the discourse of domesticity. Men inherently are made to be leaders, to be out there. Women are inherently made to be in their homes and to be these domestic beings. That's how God created them, right? So why should we care about that? I'll give you an example. Some of my Egyptian colleagues and those of you who are familiar with Egypt will be very familiar with that. When we introduce new gender-sensitive family laws, one very well-known example is the Khula law in 2000 in Egypt, and it was a judicial divorce that says the husband's consent is not necessary, is not required, right? And women can just go and get divorced as long as they give up their financial rights, right? And they don't have to prove fault. That's not from me, by the way.
Somebody, Fatima, yeah,
Okay.
It's okay.
So the critics often invoke that concept. They didn't even have to explain it. This contravenes men's qawama. This kind of contravenes men's qawama, i.e. understood as God-given, right? So in a way, also, it shows how we internalize these kinds of understandings that come from the exegetical tradition. So I see that as an example of a deconstruction of a concept, right? I do similar things with how, for example, Saadi Sheikh does that with the hadith. Right. Okay.
Now you have 10 minutes.
Okay. And then I will just show you a reconstruction one, right? Maybe I link it to Qawama, and it comes from Asma al-Amrabit's work, and how, okay, she, in a way, she's trying to say, okay, can we understand Qawama in a different way? And she looks at where it occurs in the Quran, as you know, in the same surah, 135, and in Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:8, and where there very much it means standing for justice. So if we go back to 434, can we understand it in a different way? Of course, while acknowledging the historical dimension of the Quran and the kind of context in which it was revealed, rather than understanding it as authority, but as one way of organizing spousal roles where men are obligated to do something, but not as an authority. If you work from the premise that using the same word in these different textual contexts is not arbitrary, the text has coherence. So if you work from that premise, and then she links it to the concepts of khilafa, which is mandated for men and women, right? The idea of God istakhlafa Adam, hence human beings, and what that literally means, not as some abstract concept, but what does it mean in terms of a shared mandate of building a just life on this earth? And then she links it to al-wilaya, understood in Surah At-Tawbah 71, where men and women are allies, awliya ba'duhum li ba'd. And then how that verse starts with al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy al munkar before it goes to the rituals, before it mentions as-salah and so on, and how that is relevant, and how do we understand amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy al munkar. Okay, so that's and I can go into detail, but let me tell you a little bit about activism, because I only have like maybe 7 minutes. Right? Okay, so what I did was I also looked at, okay, here's the scholarship, it's being produced and all that. Does it have any impact on the ground? So one of the case studies I studied in depth is in Egypt, and it was a very interesting time because I did in-depth ethnographics research from 2013, right after the a little bit after the revolution, the derailed revolution, or the uprising, if you want to call it. And there I found like how on the one hand, there was a chance, there was an opportunity created for Egyptian Islamic feminism at that point as a third way, not an Islamicist discourse and not a secular discourse that is anti-religious. And I look at activities in which the two main key figures in Egypt leading this Islamic feminism scholarship and activism, Mani Saleh and Umayma Abu Bakr, how I studied very carefully things that they were doing with training.
Sorry. No. I'm late.
Go ahead. Can you mute yourself, please?
Mute yourself.
Training mosque imams, using what they produced on Qawama, actually using that to train mosque imams, and then train them to put together khutbahs in the mosque that reflects this new gender-sensitive understanding to the tradition. I also saw in this ethnography the tensions. I attended meetings between them and religious scholars, and the tensions and the pushbacks. So by all means, I'm not claiming this is a success story, not at all. But also to see some developments that are happening over time, over this time later on. And one thing that I just want to highlight very briefly is how some of the actors in Egypt who are interested in reforming the religious institution, especially young Azharites, right, and others, intersect with this Islamic feminism work. They're not working on gender, and they're not particularly interested in the gender, but they are very much also, they share common ground in terms of how do we re-engage with the text, but also how do we revisit religious authority, whether when it's embodied in the institutions and how they teach. So I also did these interviews with some of these Azharites, you know, and it was very fascinating, and that speaks to my point about how we evaluate and understand this project as its relevance being beyond gender. When we say it's a reformist project, whether it's as a scholarly project or activism, also we want to look at how it intersects and how what does it mean in relation to other reformist initiatives, whether done in a kind of informal way, ad hoc way by some Azharite students, or in more structured way. So this is a point that I want to highlight. So just to conclude, I would say it is relevant within Islamic studies as a scholarship because it has something to contribute methodologically, hermeneutically. You can apply some of these methodologies to understand other questions, bring them to the text. I think also it is relevant because it focuses on the question of the relationship between ethics and law in Islam, Islamic tradition, and particularly in the Quran. And this is a question that has become very pertinent and much more important than before for many scholars, not just people working on this gender. So I think in that sense. And I also see, there's a space there for this scholarship to learn, to give more, but also to be evaluated critically. If we also look at it in relation to not only Islamic tradition, but comparative feminist theology, which is something that I've been working on a bit for the past few years. Like look at also other faith-based engagements with religion in Judaism and in Christianity, and what can we learn from one another methodologically. That's one aspect of it. The activism part, I think the most important one where we can look at, and the jury is definitely out there, is about in what way it can reform Muslim family laws, which is a big question. And for me, I think perhaps one way to evaluate it, to look at it, is not only to see, okay, was there a gender-sensitive law that was passed, and how did these scholars have something to do with it, but also in what way their ideas are trickling down. In what way are they changing the terms of debate? In what way are they changing the public discourse slowly? Is there shifts happening? So that's an area also to look at and evaluate. I just want to stop now, and I really apologize for these
No problem.
nightmare in terms of technological. But I'm
No
happy
problem
to
at all. No
Yeah.
problem at all. We have really enjoyed your talk, Professor Mulki. I think you have touched on so many important areas that are of relevance to the battles of women from east to west, wherever they are, in trying to reform Islamic family law. Obviously, Islamic family law, since they have been instituted, they have become battlefields for women and men, wherever we are. Trying to reform these laws. We put them in and then we want to reform them. I mean, obviously, the main question that would lead the discussion is what are the limits of reform? How far can we go with reform? We have seen tentatives in Tunisia going as far as reforming Islamic family law beyond the Quranic text in terms of, for example, equality in inheritance rights. So I think I should not carry on, but I should leave this to the floor to come up with their questions. I'm sure there will be many. Thank you once more.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you could start with this question, Mulki, and then we will ask everyone to raise their hands, please, if they have any question, and also to share their emails if they want to stay in our mailing list.
Okay, so what are the limits of reform, right?
Mhm.
Yes. Well, in terms of the first of all, I would say the reform is in multiple domains. One aspect of it has to do very much, as you said, Dr. Zahia, which is very important, is the Muslim family laws, right? And the Muslim family is also, we need to unpack it. Reform not in substantive laws, القوانين الموضوعية, but also in the terms of the debate, but also because I had the chance in a previous project also to sit in courts, family courts in Egypt, and how do we also change mindsets? How do we change, for example, how judges adjudicate? How do we, because it has to do also with the discourse, how do we change when, if there's a, let's say, now in Egypt and elsewhere, we have mediation-based legal system. So people first have to go through mediation before the case is brought in front of the judge. But and this mediation, the idea behind it was okay to make justice more accessible, especially people who are have limited economic means, and specifically women, you know, and maybe to create a more constructive space where the two can get together with a legal specialist, a social worker, and also someone from psychology. But usually what happens in these mediations sometimes, and even the judges, when they offer the what are their understanding about the law? So I guess to highlight my larger point is also when we say the reform of family law, it's not just about the substantive laws or the procedural laws, but it's also about the courtroom practices, the discourse behind it. Like sometimes, you know, that's one thing, how the law is enacted. And for me, a very important area, which I see also an indication of reform or not, is the debates. How do we have debates about family law? What becomes at stake, right? What language do we use, right? How do we legitimate the authority to make a claim or counterclaim? I think that's another area of reform. The other part of the reform, I would say, is also the democratization of religious authority, right? And it's not simply, and we've seen some steps in that direction in terms of like, oh, you have more women muftiyat in Egypt and in Morocco way back in the Murshidat and elsewhere, right? But is that what we're looking for? Is that it? Or is it about also what do these, definitely it's about democratization of the religious domain in the sense that it should be more open, certainly for qualified women who have the religious knowledge. But it's not just about women, it's about also how do these religious actors carry out their work, right? And I do see some positive steps that I want to tell you about. You know, there are a lot of issues, because sometimes also we can't just what is it called, like, you know, preach to the choir, right? How can we have constructive debates with other actors who are relevant and very much relevant to this question of family law, and they have a stake? They think it's okay, then you are diluting the tradition, or you are imposing Western ideas or something like that. So I would say, first of all, we need to be clear about the different domains. I see the religious domain in terms of religious authority, particularly interpretive authority, religious knowledge-based authority. I see that as extremely important. The courtroom practices, the public discourse, they are equally as important as reforming the family law. And how do we understand also reform? And for me, sometimes when we say gender sensitive, which is important, which is what this project is about, it has its pitfalls also. From a scholarly perspective, but from an activism perspective, the pitfalls is that I see it. Sometimes I wonder if it's more relevant and even more useful, not from a utilitarian perspective, but because of what the project can offer, right? If we frame it also as a project that is not just about achieving gender, but about reclaiming key ethical and theological teachings in the tradition and how they can be relevant to modern day Muslims, particularly in contexts where, whether you choose or not, the laws are based on religion or have religious genealogy, for example, or the public discourse. Yeah. I could talk on and on. So you always have to say, keep quiet. You have to tell me.
It's so interesting, Dr. Mulki. I see a hand here, but I can't see the name. There's Iqbal something. Iqra. Go ahead. Iqra, go ahead and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Ikra
Alaikum
from
salam.
Pakistan.
Hello,
وعليكم السلام
welcome.
ورحمة الله وبركاته.
It's a highly informative, and I have gained a lot of information on this topic through this webinar. I am requesting that please make an international level of research project, including different Islamic countries. So it will be very helpful for the modern Islamic communities, especially in Pakistan.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Iqra.
much.
Thank you. And Iqra, by the way, something that I didn't have a chance to mention, a new project that we did in Musawah, and which we concluded a year ago, and it's a follow-up to a big project that we were doing on trying to explore alternative ethical and legal models for a different kind of marriage than what we have in fiqh, is ethnographic research, where we studied particular initiatives to reform marriage from different actors, not just women's rights activists, right? And we because we don't have a lot of money, we would have liked to include more countries. We focused on 4 countries, and I'm happy to tell you Pakistan was one of them. Pakistan, Egypt, Indonesia, and Somaliland. And we found very interesting findings. You know, and we did interviews with women and men, but also with these actors who were who were organizing and spearheading these initiatives. And in some countries, in the case of Pakistan, it was women's rights organizations. In the case of Indonesia, it was a religion. Sorry, go ahead.
But illegally we have rights, but particularly and practically we don't have rights.
Yeah.
This is the biggest issue faced by Pakistani women.
Yeah, I hear you. The gap between the practice and the law is sometimes very glaring. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Iqra.
Thank you.
Okay, Mulki, your presentation was really يعني it brought back the deep reading of all those activists and scholars who founded the methodology and the concept of Islamic feminism. And I think that your work is pioneering in the way it has formed and discussed and diagnosed what is a methodology of Islamic feminism, which has been denied a real format, I think, in the past 2 decades. But I think with your study, we are centering Islamic feminism within the new fully-fledged, I think, thoughts that could be developed starting from now, as we have a base to move on from it. Yeah. Okay. So the nine scholars you have chosen, of course,
Right.
you said that they are not. It's not a full coverage of all Islamic feminists or thinkers, but I would like to ask you about Fatma Mernissi and what you think of where do you situate her scholarship in terms of Islamic feminism for the knowledge production, especially that she has deconstructed hadith in a very, very thorough way. Okay, I'll leave it here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hatoun. That's a very important question, and I locate her as the pioneer, actually. So, and I have her in the earlier chapter where I say there are certain figures that are very important and relevant for these scholars and paved the way, even if they were not directly shaped by her, but certainly her ideas and her questions and her approach was very, very important. And she is one that certainly, and I talk about it in the early chapters. And I also, you know, and we had the opportunity I say my colleagues and I in Musawah, to meet with her just a few months before she died, actually, in Morocco. And it was also interesting because also Dr. Manisi, a very important scholar and who had a lot of contributions, she also shifted in her thought, right, in her work, you know. And I think that shift is also relevant. I think that it's also good to capture the shift in scholars' thoughts, you know, from their earlier to later work, and what we can take away from that. So later on, she was completely thought that this project was very important, was very relevant, and we had very good discussions with her when we were in Morocco for a Musawah work. Of course, some of her works, even though if she does not say, okay, I'm an Islamic feminist or something, is really relevant, like the one that you mentioned. And the one about the hadith particularly is important, I believe, because she kind of combines two methodologies, which later on people do that also. One, very much from the traditional hadith criticism. Okay, how come we can trust this transmitter if he failed the test according to the criteria of the traditional hadith criticism itself, right? And then she uses this feminist psychological reading of his profile of his life and what it can shed light on, and when he said the hadith and so on, right? So yes, by all means, I consider her a pioneer, someone who paved the way. And I like I said, I'm also interested in the shift in her thoughts later on, right? Which I think if she had, of course, alhamdulillah, you know, it was her time to go, and may God bless her, Allah yarhamha. But if she'd been around, I think she would have had more to say in terms of writing after 2015. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think Yafa, hello Yafa, welcome. I think you have a question. Tfadali.
Yes, thank you so much, Mulki. Really interesting. I you know, I follow your work very closely because it's really eye-opening, and I love reading your work too. And I'm really glad that you are also you know, pleading for putting ethical frameworks into the discussion as well. I think this is very important, particularly if we want to achieve change in courts and in the legal system, because as you said, we need a change of awareness, a change of understanding, and that can only be achieved if we tackle it right from the right angle. Because I mean, history has shown us that religious leaders, courts, and policymakers, they react allergically when they just hear the word feminism. So I think we need to find another framework, and I think ethics here, or ethical framework, would be very good, particularly if we link it also to debates on maqasid al-sharia and have that included in the discussion. And here I'm particularly thinking of maybe, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts around, you know, redefining authority and responsibility within Islamic jurisprudence, within Islamic frameworks, because I mean, you also referred to ethnographic field, where we need to go to the field, we need to talk to people, we need to see what are the lived experiences. As our colleague from Pakistan said, we have theory on one side, but practice is completely different in a lot of contexts. So I think the social, legal, and ethical frameworks, they go hand in hand in finding ways to change that awareness within the existing systems. So yeah, I would like to hear your thoughts about maybe we need to to redefine authority and responsibility, particularly because if we look at societies, there is a huge change in authority and responsibility. If we take responsibility alone, in a lot of families, women are the main breadwinners. Women are the ones who are taking care of the children. Women are, you know, the doers, and therefore the gender responsibilities within our societies have shifted, and therefore our understanding or definition of responsibility needs to shift accordingly too, and that then translated into the legal system. What do you think?
Yeah, totally agree. Yes, I also follow your work, and so happy to see you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's nice to see you. Thank God for I thank Dr. Zahia and Dr. Hatoun for bringing us together. About the ethical framework, absolutely, you are spot on, and that also is not only because it is relevant to the textual tradition. It's very important for the maqasid, for example. That is the core. That is the core. Even and the jurists, even if they were patriarchal, fine, but they understood that is the intent of the hukm is, you know, it has a maqsad. It is supposed to fulfill a certain ethical intent. They understood that. So that core of the intent of the law and also the ethos of the Quran, that it's about that, is it is not only true to the tradition, but it can be a common ground. You're absolutely right, a common ground where we can engage other, I don't want to use a word from development, but I will, like other stakeholders, other actors, you know, the religious scholars, the judges, you know, all these people who this is also relevant to them, right? So I agree, and I think we need to explore. I don't know about maybe not not only in the writings, but like when we have like forums where we engage with them or we work with them, how we can highlight that and frame the conversation within that framework. Particularly, I'll give you a quick example from some of the recent research that we found. We did it through Musawah, and I was telling Iqra about it when we studied ethnographically these initiatives for reforming marriage in these 4 countries. In Egypt, the Azhar and Wizrat al-Awqaf, they've been doing these pre-marriage training for young couples for a while, since 2000, I think, and maybe 17 or yeah. And the interesting thing is, and then, you know, we observed these sessions, we interviewed the people doing them, and they're all Azharites and religious scholars and so on. And they very much problematize a hierarchical marriage. They problematize Qiwama as authority and as men's control, and they not from a gender equality perspective, but very much emphasizing, number one, and most importantly, this ethics. Like, okay, how do you understand that God says in the Quran, mawadda wa sakan wa rahma? This is something that Islamic feminist scholars all the time write about. Okay, what does it mean? Like, you know, what is your responsibility as an ethical human being from an Islamic perspective? They highlight that. And then the thing that I saw that was very fascinating also is how they say that is also linked to how we can address real problems on the ground and be happy, which was very interesting. Like, religious scholars also talking about happiness, like it's not simply about you know, decreasing the divorce rate, which is important to them, but how can you have a happy, fulfilling life? So that I totally agree with you, and I think we need to explore what would be the formats and the spaces where we can amplify and say, here's where we agree, here's where it's important, and where does that take us, and then link it to definitely, for example, why more families are led by women, you know, for example, but not, I don't even use led, but like supported by women, but and also how this fixed spousal roles doesn't work for the well-being of families. Like sometimes it's the woman who's working and the husband might be studying or might be taking care of his mother, and you know, it doesn't work. No, there are different circumstances, underemployed, unemployed at certain point of his life. So, and yet, as we all know, scholars and activists, it creates also this masculinity crisis. You know, like you're only invested, your masculinity only comes from this idea that I'm a provider and I'm in charge. rather than, and which is that definitely has been problematized. And the term, yes, of course, it is a non-starter when you talk with certain people, like to say, and for me, I don't care about the term. We can call it anything else. I was using it analytically in an academic book, but I wouldn't even use it. I think that would be, counterproductive. But if I were engaging with other scholars, which we have done many times, by the way, and also scholars in Morocco, but it's more about the lived reality, which, by the way, the fuqaha always took into account. When they're giving a fatwa, it's not only about knowing the ahkam and the rules of your school, but also that's why the fatwa can change for one person to the other, right? So what I would say is I agree with you. And the authority part is not only within the family, and I would link it to the ethical part, but also the authority of producing knowledge. For me, that's so important. And I'm talking about not academic knowledge, but also this religious knowledge that becomes the basis for normativity, social and religious. I think we need to go there. And what constitutes this? What legitimates it? And how can we have a conversation about that, right? And how can we have more people that are well versed entering there, and how can they establish that authority? Because that is so important, Yafa. And if we don't make a breakthrough in that area, I think we will still have all these challenges. Like for example, when you talk to religious scholars, and maybe some of you have seen this, sometimes before they even read what you've written or hear you, the first thing they will do, first of all, other than saying, okay, do you have a traditional training or not, they will see, can you is your i'rab correct or not? if oh my God, if you say a jumla in Arabic and your fa'il is mansoob rather than marfu', you're finished and no more conversation, right? and we're all familiar with that. I've all come across that, right? So things like
Amazing.
that. Yes, but I agree with you. Yeah.
Amazing questions, amazing answers, amazing discussion. I have a few more questions, if you don't mind, Dr. Mulki. Iqra, I will leave you because you have already asked. I will take people who haven't asked. If there is time, I will come back to you, okay? There is Lida Larson. Lida, please ask your question. Can you hear me, Lida?
Lisa.
Sorry,
Lida or Lida. I'm not sure how to read it.
It's Lida.
Lida. Hello, Lida. Yeah. Please ask your question.
Dr. Mulki, I love your work. Thank you so much. Your book, your presentations, I'm really enjoying it. Thank you. I have a question. So as I'm sure you've experienced, there is a wide spectrum of issues that fall under the purview of Islamic feminism. For some, issues of polygamy, inheritance are priority. For others, these are more substantively grounded in the tradition, and they don't see it legitimate to engage with those. They rather work on issues like political participation, for example. How do you, in your work, in your projects, in your work in Musawah, how do you reach common ground with different levels of different relationships to orthodoxy, different relationships with the Sharia? How do you reach common ground when you come together with your colleagues and work on these? Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia, right? Lida. So Lida, if I understood you correct, and please correct me, one was people work on different issues, but also I felt like you were also getting at the idea that people can have different understandings of the religion, of the tradition, and different relationships. So maybe not everybody's on the same page on certain perspectives. Is that what you mean? And therefore, how do you work together?
Yes, exactly. Like some people's approach is more through human rights, right?
Right.
And others are more invested in finding religious backing
Right.
So they could like more confidently say, no, Islamically, there is a better way.
Right.
How
Right.
do you bring these approaches together?
Okay, a good question. Thank you. First of all, in Musawah, I'm part of Musawah and I work with them very closely. We focus on Muslim family laws, and Muslim family laws in most countries, except most Muslim majority countries, except with a very few couple, we can name them. They are drawn on fiqh, but in a hybrid way. We cannot claim they are exactly the classical fiqh that we read in the books, but in a hybrid way. Now they are state codes. Therefore, and often the question of reform often becomes entangled with is this legitimate religiously or not? Why are you using? Okay, how come you make the whole the consent of the husband is irrelevant because all the legal schools agree that you should get his consent, right? So hence the engagement with the religion for us is a no-brainer. Because our main focus is on Muslim family laws, right? That's one thing. But we also draw, and we think it's extremely important to draw on the lived realities. So always when we do textual historical work, we combine it always in every research project with ethnographic work on the ground. What are people actually doing? What are they talking about? How are they marrying? How are they divorcing? Right? Because we believe there's a very important dialectic relationship between the texts, plural, understood plurally, in a plural form, and the lived realities. And also we think constitutions and national laws are relevant because we also live in citizens. We are in a nation state now. So that is relevant despite the flaws and maybe the legal citizenship and what the constitution says and what people experience on the ground might be different, but it is also relevant. It's a discourse that is invoked, and we say so. We use this four-pronged approach, and human rights understood as a broad discourse and none of them are perfect. So Islamic teachings and the lived reality, the national laws and the constitutions, and this human rights as a discourse that it's not doesn't just belong to the West. Of course, it has a certain genealogy. We're not only talking about the conventions, whether it's CEDAW or others, but in broadly speaking, the concept and the idea and the discourse. So I was just answering in terms of my own circle, what we work on, and of course in my work as an academic, I'm also interested very much in the relationship between the text and the lived realities. Hence, I work on. But from an activist perspective, how do people who it depends on your context. How do people come together and common ground? Like in Musawah, again, not all of us necessarily are the same on an individual level, how we relate to our tradition or what is more important or not. But there are certain goals and common grounds that we all share. We all share that the importance of engaging with this question from within the tradition and why it's important, right? Now, as an activist, I think it's when you're building bridges, you find the common ground, right? So you don't insist other people to work on what you're working on, right? But if there's a common ground, then you work together on that common ground. If, for example, in a context where the religion is not relevant to the question of political participation, then maybe that's not the right people for you to work with. That's fine. There can be allies in the sense that we're all committed to the social justice and inclusion, but they might not be the people that you will closely work with. And maybe you had something else in mind that I haven't answered that you let me know. But for us, it's also what's important, I think, is never to only we discourage this idea of focusing on one issue. I think that we believe, and by we here I mean this network of scholars and activists in Musawah. I think we believe that has been one of our problems. Okay, we're gonna just focus on polygamy. We're gonna focus on inheritance, right? It might be one thing we do under a larger thing, but the point is, first, can you do the important groundwork of the methodology, the framework, how you understand the tradition in general. How do you approach the text? How do you link the text and the lived reality? And then you tackle. So, for example, when we worked on Qawam and Wilayah, the reason was because we argued these are foundational concepts that are the basis for all these different other things that we talk about, whether men and women having unequal divorce rights, or the question of polygamy and others. So I guess that's the approach. But if I haven't answered and you have something else in your mind, by all means, please jump in.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mulki. I think we are left now with about 6 minutes.
Okay.
What I will do, I will ask those who have questions to ask them all, and then you give one answer to all the questions in order to make sure we don't leave anyone unhappy. So I think Hayam Al-Ghusi. Hayam, you have a question? Or has she gone now? Hayam? Dr. Hayam?
She's gone.
She's disappeared. She's gone. Have Ru'ayn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr.
Ru'ayn,
Ru'ayn, تفضلي. Oh, Dr. Hayam is still here, she says. No?
Yes, she is still here.
Dr. Hayam, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Very well.
مرحبا.
Hello. No, I'm actually, thank you very much for this interesting talk, because it's simply reflecting on what's in my mind, actually, because I'm working in the same field. My concern is how we can transfer all this knowledge to the women at the grassroots level. Mm-hmm. Because in academia, it's easy to understand and comprehend what we are talking about. But when we come down to the, in the upper Egypt, I'm Egyptian Sudanese, so I speak from an Egyptian background. In Egypt, when you go down into the villages and you start to just explain what we are talking about, we find resisting more from women than men at one point. But at the same time, we found some group of women, they are eager to listen, to acknowledge what we are saying, and to take over. So, but the majority, simply, they are resisting all this.
Thank you.
As an activist, how we can deal with that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hayam. Ru'ayn, please, can you ask your question?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. رؤى من معي.
عليكم السلام. أهلا وسهلا.
Riyadh. Doctor, I have a very, I know you probably mentioned this at the start of the presentation, but it's something that I think I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the issues with utilizing the term feminist or feminism. And I find that really interesting because, as you said, I think some people shy away from it. Some people have negative connotations with it. In my line of work, which is specifically medical, so it's medical bioethics, feminist ethics lends itself well to the projects that I try to do. And so whenever I think of the Islamic perspective, especially when it comes to women's rights in healthcare as patients or as providers, it's very easy to transition towards feminist ethics as a term, but I am aware that certainly from an Islamic perspective, and actually more and more increasingly so in the West as well, the term feminism has become a little bit loaded, and has always been loaded, but I think perhaps increasingly so. And so my question is, do you think there is value in trying to utilize a different term? And if so, what would that term be?
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think this is enough for you, Dr. Mulki, to answer in 4 minutes.
Okay.
But there was, sorry, but I think
she's gone. There was another question, but that person disappeared. So I think this is all we have time for, Hatun. In 3 minutes now. We are losing minutes one by one.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you to both colleagues for these questions, important questions. For the colleague from Egypt, working with the women on the ground, most importantly, it's about the lived reality. Validate, because also, and this maybe in a way relates also to the second question, as we know in feminist work, theory-wise, and also whether it's at empirical work, the feminism has shown, the scholarship that is, the importance of really foregrounding experiential knowledge as a form of very important source of knowledge. You know, it's not just the cognitive knowledge, but like how people live. Now, when one engages with women on the ground, that's where we start. How do you live? What is good for you? What is good for your children? What do you aspire for, right? And I speak also from experience, because I also, I don't only do textual work, I do ethnographic work. So I talk to women who are not scholars, whether in Finland or in Egypt, right? And look at, like, okay, for example, how do they marry? How do they divorce? How do they raise their kids? Some recent work that I've done was, how do they engage with the Quran? What does the Quran mean to them on a daily basis, right? And why, right? So the lived realities is very important. So it's not about preaching to them, but it's about understanding what they're going through and what they need through their lived realities. Now, when you say resistance, are we talking about, for example, specific practices, like how do we get them to see that child marriage is not a good thing? Masalan, if we are engaged in advocacy work against child marriage, masalan, right? And they say, no, I have to get my daughter married at age 14 or 15. Again, I would say the lived realities is very, very, very important. You know, in what is this person? And of course, we know there are always multiple factors that lead to these, perpetuate these patriarchal practices, not just religious teachings or law, right? We have to have a multidimensional approach. But the point is, if we show and if we have a conversation, and not just conversation, but a relationship where we are prioritizing, highlighting that lived reality and what constitutes her well-being, I think, and I know, and I've seen it in my work, where we reach areas of where we can talk. It doesn't have to be, oh, do you believe in Islamic feminism, or do you believe in women and men having equal rights? Not that. So there can be a case made for how child marriage is not a good idea, right? Perhaps they'll still end up doing child marriage because there's so many other factors. We know that as scholars, right? You know, life is complicated. So I would say that, right? So the lived reality, I foreground the lived reality, her experience, that's number one. And the ethical framework, because the ethical framework that Dr. Yafa talked about earlier is something that particularly any regular Muslims would relate to, and not just Muslims, any human beings, right? And I'm saying here Muslim particularly because we were talking about Islamic textual tradition, but would relate to, right? Now, about the Islamic feminism, the second question, I know it is a loaded term, but and as I told Dr. Yafa, it depends also where I'm using it. So if I'm working as an activist, or if I'm having a conversation with actors, you know, like a religious scholar, or in a village, or, you know, and for me, it's not about the term, it's about the issue. So I wouldn't use that. But academically, and for me, I use it as a lens to understand. You know, academically, I think it's not a good idea to give it up, because the problem is, by giving it up and by not unpacking it, by not defining it, by not explaining exactly what do we mean by it, just like what you said in your work, it is helpful. You can pinpoint to it. The same thing here. Can we pinpoint what do we mean as a form of knowledge? What do we mean as a methodology? When I say academically, I'm adopting a feminist approach, and we know, of course, there are feminisms, not just one, right? Because also feminist work and scholarly work, that is, in some ways, it's still a misfit within academia. Often it's seen as, okay, these are the angry women who are just, you know. Although maybe in some departments it's a little bit better than others, you know, then they see also the contribution to other questions, not just the gender question, and that the gender, as we all know, is not just about women, right? But I see also there's a loss in giving it up as an analytical category, as a theoretical framework within the scholarship, within research. Within research. Definitely, I see that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mulki. You have given us so much to think about. Actually, we may not sleep tonight thinking about all these things, because obviously this is a complicated matter. There's no one solution to it. And diversity in interpretation, diversity in understanding, diversity of needs, etc., dictate different interpretations to sources and therefore to the law or the making of the law, and pose many challenges to, again, how do we approach this huge matter called the law, and how do we approach it ethically, how do we approach it legally, etc. So there's a lot for us to think about. I think this necessitates a whole conference, maybe somewhere in the world, I don't know where. But thank you so much, and thank you to all of you who have come and attended this event. If you would like to join our network, please leave your email in the chat, and we will include you in the future communications. We have another semester. Obviously, we have one more webinar for this semester in December, and I'm happy to announce it. It's the famous Saudi poet Fawzia Abu Khalid. Looking forward to meet her. And then there will be a program for semester 2. I think I should not just keep talking. I should let my colleague and best friend Hatoun say something. تفضلي Hatoun. But shukran to everybody. Thank you, everyone. I'm really pleased to hear you all.
Okay, I just want to second what Professor Zahia said of thankfulness and greetings to Dr. Mulki, and the sharing, the very valuable sharing of her knowledge production today is very valuable to all of us. And I think everybody is returning with lots of food for thoughts, and that is just continuous, I believe. So I repeat what Professor Zahia said about our next meeting. It will be on the 17th of December, which is different. It's, to avoid the Christmas period. 17th of December, a Wednesday, Dr. Fawzia Abu Khalid will be speaking about Saudi women, from where and whither.
And I just want to thank you all for the invitation, my dear colleagues, Dr. Zahia and Dr. Hatoun, and for the audience for their interest. Thank you, and sorry for the technological problem.
Yeah, today wasn't really technically friendly. We all had issues with the technical side. Don't worry.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure being in this forum, and it's especially a great pleasure having you, Dr. Mulki. Thank you from the heart, and all the best with your project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you for our technical support, Ikram and Bayan and all of you. Thank you so much.
Can we stay a bit?
Mm-hmm.